Welcome to the 2020 Neighborhood Ada County Highway District Candidate Forum. I'm Don Day, the publisher of BoiseDev.com. Our BoiseDev reporters help Treasure Valley residents understand what's behind the changes in the growth they see in their neighborhoods. I'm pleased to be your moderator for this evening. This forum is brought to you by a group of 16 neighborhood associations. How about that? The forum organizers are Deborah Mullner, Karen Danley, Linda Paul, Deanna Smith, and Diane Ronayne. American Sign Language translation will be provided by Sierra McIver and Lavana Andrew with funding by LINC, the Living Independence Network Corporation. So, the big question, what is the Ada County Highway District? The ACHD is responsible for planning, designing, and managing efficient traffic flow and traffic safety throughout Ada County, except for the roads that fall under state or federal jurisdictions, such as state highways, I-84, Eagle Road, and a few like that. Ada County is divided into 5 ACHD districts. This year, citizens are voting for commissioners in districts 1, 2, and 5 only. ACHD commissioners for districts 3 and 4 will be elected in 2 years in 2022. This slide right here shows the candidates running in each district this year. The office of commissioner is nonpartisan. Commissioners are elected by residents within their district boundaries, but they rule on issues countywide. This slide displays the District 1 boundaries. Look there and see if that's your area. Tonight's forum will be divided into 3 sections, 1 for each district, starting this evening with District 1 after this introduction. District 2 will begin approximately at 5:40. And District 5 will start at 6:20. This is a forum rather than a debate. We've asked the candidates to answer 7 questions posed by neighborhoods. The candidates have had a week to think about their responses since they received the questions on September 30th. Each candidate will have 1.5 minutes to respond to each question. Our timer tonight is Eleanor Cheehee with the League of Women Voters. Thank you. Candidates will alternate answering questions first. So we will begin with District 1 Commissioner candidates Jim Hansen and Kara Veit, who will each take a minute to introduce themselves. And Jim, I believe we're going to start with you.
Great, thanks, Don. I appreciate the neighborhood associations very much for putting this forum together. I'm Jim Hansen, and I live in District 1, which is most of the bench, much of South Boise and the East End and Barber Valley. There are actually 13 neighborhood associations in that district. Of all the ACHD districts, this is the district that has it's completely covered by neighborhood associations. There's no parts of it that aren't covered by a neighborhood association. And a big, huge shout out tonight to neighborhood association leaders and presidents, because it is a completely thankless job. And I can attest that I rely on them tremendously for input on what it's like in their neighborhood, and they sort through so many issues at the forefront. And I've enjoyed working with them over the last approximately 8 years. I've served on the commission for 8 years, and this is an independent commission, so I see this not as a branch of ACHD represented to the neighborhoods, but as the neighborhoods represented to ACHD. Thank you.
Jim, thank you. Kara? Your 1 minute starts right now.
My name's Kara Veit. I'm running for District 1, and I am a lifelong resident of Southeast Boise. I am running for this position because I have had 15 years of transportation experience. In the recent press articles, they've called me a political newcomer, but I'm not new to transportation. I've been in transportation for 15 years, organizing the public meetings, writing the postcards that you all get when there's construction, and also managing issues and conflicts when they appear. Those same characteristics carry over into being a commissioner. And so also, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I always knew I wanted to run for office. That I did an internship there during college. And I have a heart for public service. I know that I can do it. I want to serve you, and I want to make sure that I'm working for you, not the other way around, which It seems to be getting normal these days in politics. But people ask me why I wanted to do this. And I said, because if good people with good ideas who have the experience don't step up and do it, then it leaves a vacuum. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be running.
Kara, thank you. So let's get into the questions. And our first question, big surprise, centers on growth. We're going to start with Jim on this. What is your vision for a transportation system that matches the needs of our fast-growing communities?
So when I first moved to the Treasure Valley in 1984 and 85, this was much smaller. And when I first, in fact, came on the commission just 8 years ago, we've grown by more than 10% in terms of the number of roads. The key to growth is that there has to be a healthy transportation system for everybody. All modes of transportation must work. So it's a little like the right-of-way is the area through which lots of people can travel. And if we just rely on one form of transportation to the exclusion of others, it's not healthy and vibrant. In fact, when we look at the recession that we had about 12 years ago, those areas that serve the community well, walking, biking, driving, were more resilient. Those that were very heavily car dependent were those that suffered and struggled. And so I would suggest that much of what we have to do is evaluate how this system works for all modes, and not simply to basically socially engineer the system so people have no choices whatsoever, no freedom of choice.
Jim, thanks. Kara, same question.
We need to be proactive. For the past 10 plus years, as Jim Hansen has said, we've grown 10% and we have been reactive. An example of that is Eagle Road. It's true you can't widen yourself out of congestion. I absolutely believe that. But we need to have all modes. And the question that was asked was, what was your vision? And my vision would include, for my ideal transportation system, roads that accommodate traffic so that people can get from point A to point B safely, efficiently, and cost effectively. It would include mass transit, such as a rapid transit bus system on State Street, which is already in the process of being developed, which I definitely support. It would include that. It would include perhaps building a south bypass south of town, because people are calling it sprawl and they're complaining about it, but you know what? It's here, and we need to get ahead of it instead of complaining about it, and we need to come together to do that, because all those houses south of Boise, they've been designed, they've been permitted, they have been ready for construction, and now they are being constructed. And so we need to have a good infrastructure to get them into place, so that we can serve those new residents or those people that live in those new communities south of Boise, because it's going to grow just like Eagle Road. We need to get ahead of it and be proactive.
Kara, thank you. So our next question, not surprising for a forum of neighborhood associations, asks about neighborhood associations. Boise's NAs receive many comments expressing residents' transportation frustrations. Do you consider citizen organizations such as neighborhood associations and homeowners associations as your partners? If so, how would you engage them? This time, we'll start with Kara Veit.
Of course, neighborhood associations are the partners of ACHD. You all organized this tonight, and I thank you for doing so. I worked for ACHD as a community engagement manager, and I went out and I talked to the neighborhood associations probably several times a month, and I was part of the Vista Live committee, and I was engaged with those neighborhoods. And I left about a year ago. I was there for about a year. Now I work for Power Engineers. But I don't know if they're still doing that. I'd have to ask the neighborhoods. But I think that getting them involved, absolutely. And the way that we can do that, because the word is complaining, it shouldn't be complaining. It should be giving input. What we need to do is set up a neighborhood advisory committee that meets with ACHD leadership maybe once a quarter, or twice a week, something like that, or twice a year, sorry, and that they bring them their concerns, and also the director of planning would be in that, so that then the neighborhood associations are communicating what's happening, because they're the ones out on the ground. They're the ones out talking to folks, and they are the ones that are experiencing the sidewalk gaps. They know where everything is. They can tell us. And so let's meet with them and form an advisory committee and have them come tell us what needs to be done about maybe twice a week, and then actually take that, because the most important thing is that the neighborhood associations, their input needs to be meaningful.
Kara, thank you. Jim, same question.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, most of the projects, the neighborhood projects in the 5-year integrated work plan, and certainly in District 1, and that's the case, I'm sure, with other districts, came from the neighborhood associations. So ACHD worked with those neighborhoods to develop plans, neighborhood plans, and then came up with solutions. One great example, the Depot Bench will be getting a major project for traffic calming on Kootenai, and that grew out of the neighborhood. So I helped to just facilitate that, attended all the open houses and spoke to the neighbors. This was very important. Now working with the Vista Neighborhood Association, because they need some traffic calming on Kootenai, on Nez Perce and Oahe, which serves the same sort of cut-through function on Overland. There's a great example of some neighbors in Southeast Boise where there's no crossing between Bound Crossing and much further down on Boise Avenue. And they organized, collect signatures, and got a crossing on East Burgesson and Boise Avenue. So that's the heart of it. You really have to work closely on an almost daily basis, answering calls and making sure that input comes through. It's the job of the commissioner to make sure all that input comes through. What I love about the neighborhood associations, of course, is that you often hash through differences before it reaches a point where it enters into a plan or it comes before a public hearing. You know who the outliers are, and oftentimes can sort through the differences so that really it comes down to facilitating the consensus that has already been reached in the neighborhood. Thanks, Don.
Yeah, so let's talk now about allocation of funds, and I believe we have a graphic that we'll show here. ACHD funding primarily comes from 4 sources. They are property taxes, fuel taxes, development impact fees, and Ada County's vehicle registration fees. And you can see that all up there. There's some other things that fill in, but those are the 4 big ones. How would you prioritize ACHD's limited funds to address all of Ada County's transportation issues? And this time we'll start with Jim Hansen.
Yeah, that's very important. One thing I've observed over the last few years is there's a tendency to say, well, this project's not eligible under this funding stream, and this project or this thing has to be spent. We have to spend this money because we're collecting this money, and we can only spend it on these things. We need to take a holistic approach, and the key is use measurements. Measure all aspects of level of service. The system we have now requires us to measure level of service for cars at the peak hour, but we don't necessarily measure the return on investment for the local businesses if we expand this road. We don't measure currently a level of service, which is a very different creature, on people who are walking, biking, people with disabilities. So integrating those helps us to prioritize and not get stuck on where those funding sources come from. And I think that's the key, because we're not elected to spend the money. We're elected to invest the money the people have entrusted to us to create public assets. And these assets, we owe it to the people that those assets return value on that investment. And the only way you can do to tell the taxpayers this has value is to be able to say, and this is how much value that is. So we have to have those tools and not get caught up on these different funding streams. If there's weaknesses in one funding stream as to opposed to another funding stream, often we can counterbalance the two. And ultimately, like with the impact fees, if it's too narrow, we go in as a united county and say, give us the flexibility under this statute to allow us more flexibility in applying these funds.
So Kara, over to you. We're talking about funding allocations and how you work with those limited ACHD funds
Right.
to address transportation issues.
First, I think the concept of value needs to be more defined, because what's valuable to one person is not valuable to another person. We need to work with what we have. Right now, we have roads. The Ada County Highway District manages roads. 5,177 miles of roads. And we have 95% of people take jobs. You know, that doesn't mean that we can't have wonderful bicycle lanes. And we have great support for the rapid bus project that's out in VRT, but that's VRT's responsibility to make that. And I'll support them, but they need to take the lead on that. We take the lead on the roads, and I think that we need to look at making certain streets designated bicycle streets, so that they are byways, east, west, north, south. So to get separate low-stress bike connectivity is very important to me, because that is also part of the roads. Bicycles are part of the roads. So that needs to be number one. So capital improvements, and then I think also maintenance. Maintenance is actually the number one thing that needs to be maintenance number one, and then capital improvements below that, because our pavement is our most important asset that we have. ACHD has the best pavement in the country. We should all feel blessed to have the kinds of roads that we do right now, and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to siphon off money to projects that are not valuable. So I want to keep our roads and our pavement in great condition.
Kara, thank you. Our next section talks about people with disabilities. It's been stated, serve ages 8 to 80 and everyone is better served. How could ACHD improve roads, paths, sidewalks, and crossings for use by people of all ages and diverse abilities, from parents with strollers to folks using a cane or wheelchair? This time, we'll start with Kara Veit.
When I first filed to run, I had a gentleman call me. His name was Mark. I won't give his last name. And so his wife was she had lost a leg and had a prosthetic. And so he called me, he said, Kara, as a commissioner, I hope you do something about those rounded yellow domes that are at every intersection. And he was referring to the yellow plastic pads that are at the pedestrian ramps. Pedestrian ramps is the right word. And so the level of bumps that are on there, how high they are, it's really hard for people to get across them. And so if they haven't, the ADA excluded those kinds of pedestrian ramps in 2011. And so I don't know why we're still using the same ones that are not accessible for people that have disabilities. I think disabilities need to be designed by the people who have the disability. There was a wonderful 60 Minutes last night on, and you should all watch it, look it up. It was about a blind man who's an architect. He lost his sight, and he ended up 10 years later designing multiple facilities for the blind, and he designed them how people who weren't blind would never even dream of doing it. And it really the putting in the framework doesn't need to be too intrusive, but we need to make sure that people who are disabled are giving input and helping the process of developing those tools by which we will help them travel.
Thank you. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Don. ACHD has an advisory committee for people with disabilities to provide a lot of input. I have learned an enormous amount from that advisory committee and from all the advisory committees. I think it's a job of the commissioner to attend those meetings and to learn. And one of the things we learned in the process was that there was non-compliance on a number of areas, particularly where there are diagonal curb ramps and inaccessible push buttons. And so because that committee was organized and enough commissioners listened to them, we pushed forward in creating a process of completely inventorying all of those that are non-compliant. The other, I think it's critical, is there has to be connectivity amongst accessible facilities, because you can't just have an accessible ramp that then leads to nowhere. It's the same thing with pedestrian and bicycle facilities. So you just can't say this ramp is compliant if it doesn't help someone actually get to a bus stop they need to get to. And so the network of accessible facilities is really critical. And I'm glad that we're starting to move more in that direction. And a lot of that impetus has also come from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Make sure that it's networked. It doesn't do any good to just build this section of sidewalk that is fully accessible if no one uses it because it's not accessible from other ends. We have great information from our transit services because a lot of people with disabilities use our transit services. So making sure that we help people get to bus stops and make sure the bus stops are accessible, but also the way in which they get to those bus stops is accessible.
Now we're going to talk about transportation impacts. Should ACHD take into consideration the impact of each project on the surrounding neighborhood's quality of life, including downstream traffic, safety, connectivity, air and noise pollution? Examples include approving foothills development, which often adds traffic to older residential neighborhood streets, and approving suburbs on peripheral farmland, which increases single occupancy vehicle commuter traffic and puts pressure on ACHD for expensive road widening. How could ACHD better address such impacts? This time we'll start with Jim Hansen.
Thanks, Don. If you want to know what an agency values, look at what it measures. If it doesn't measure it, it doesn't value it. I understand that ACHD was a special purpose district and that it has only so much jurisdiction over certain things. But that doesn't mean it can't measure all those things that you described so that it can be part of the process. In fact, it should measure it in partnership with the land use agency, with the city or the county that is also reviewing it, so that it can be integrated into a decision-making process that then says, this is good for this community, or these are the usually it's not 100% good or 100% bad. Usually there's pros and cons, and we need to be able to weigh those things off against each other. The impact fee statute is a really good example, and the way in which the ordinance, which has been implemented at ACHD, is even narrower, is a great example because the direct impacts of many new developments in areas that aren't slated to have roads expanded under the impact fee, under what's called the capital improvements plan. Those impact fees go to pay for something far away from that neighborhood when they could be used, ought to be used, to pay for the impacts much closer, much more directly impacted. And so that's one of the key tools I think we have to change, we have to advocate for, but we can't do it if we don't have the basic data to be able to say, and this is how we're going to improve this. Yeah, we might shave off a second or two for the commuter in a car at the peak hour, but what is the cost to people who are walking or biking to school, or what does it cost to those businesses that need to access those neighborhoods?
Thanks. Kara?
The answer to this is ACHD is not a land use planning agency. Nearly everything that Commissioner Hansen just described when evaluating subdivisions, that's not ACHD's purview. It's roads, going back to what I said before. So ACHD make sure that the developers follow the policies and they approve the roads, because that's what they're sworn to office to do. They're sworn to uphold the office that they will take care of Ada County's roads and pavement. And so as when it says, how could ACHD better address the impacts, that's not ACHD's role to address the impacts. As long as there's adequate access in, and there's emergency access and fire trucks can get in, and it is easy to get in and out of, and it meets all the codes and all the policies of ACHD, then ACHD shouldn't be denying subdivisions based on personal agendas or their personal political philosophies and denying those agencies. So once again, ACHD is not a land use planning agency, and I think we are growing, and we need to keep that in mind. I would like that we could make those kinds of decisions, but then I would run for city council instead.
Kara, thank you. Now let's talk about Vision Zero. Traffic calming is a top priority for neighborhoods. Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, and equitable mobility for all. Vision Zero acknowledges that many factors contribute to safe mobility, including roadway design, speed, human behavior, technology, and government policies, and sets clear goals that will achieve the vision of zero fatalities and severe injuries. Do you think ACHD should use Vision Zero in its policies to address traffic calming? And we'll start this time with Kara.
When I got this question, I looked up Vision Zero because I thought it was in reference to the Idaho Transportation State Department's Vision Zero, because they also have a Vision Zero towards zero deaths. And so, but it turns out that it's a different Vision Zero. And so I researched it, and I think that it would warrant a community involvement process before ACHD adds any policies into it. It says it's based on multidisciplinary leadership, collaboration, systems approach, data-driven. But it seems that it's based on people make mistakes. The road system and related policies should be designed to ensure those inevitable mistakes do not result in severe injuries and fatalities. Well, my question is, I think our road engineers do their best every day to try to do that. And I'm not saying that our road designs are perfect. We're improving them every day, and there's things we can do to calm traffic, like bulb outs, and we can calm traffic and do road diets in neighborhood areas. Those are the perfect ways to do it in local streets. But it also says Vision Zero brings together stakeholders, and it acknowledges many factors to contribute to safe mobility. So it looks like it's a road planning agency. I'm not sure that's much different than Compass. So I think if we would just need to evaluate it.
Okay, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Don. Yeah, several years ago, one of our local consultants brought in a Vision Zero training program. I want to say it was maybe 5 years ago, and I attended it. Immersed myself in that, and a couple of staff from ACHD attended that as well. And so I brought that to ACHD, said, this is what we should do. It's a module for measuring and basically saying, these are the things that you would measure and then hold accountable and adjust so that you could incorporate areas where we know that people are more likely than not to make an error. It shouldn't be an error that then costs their lives. That's the basic concept of Vision Zero, is you adjust the way in which you make decisions in an organization before you start building that capital infrastructure. I was in the minority. I'm hopeful that we can continue to talk about this. I did not get support from enough of my colleagues to move forward to become a Vision Zero agency. But the more people talk about it, the more people become aware of it. So I'm confident we can do that. The thing I've been asking for that has grown out of that is even more specific, is that if we're going to go into a road to do something, repaving, put in a new ramp, evaluate it for speeding. If there's speeding there, let's rip it up at the same time. Owyhee was a great example, spending quite a bit of money, most of it's federal, but some of our local money, to repave Owyhee Street. Well, I already hear from the neighbors, there's speeding on that segment of Owyhee Street. Perhaps some sort of traffic calming, some sort of curb extension might help to do that. When I asked for it, again, I was in the minority. I think we need to have these evaluations on all of our projects. If we're going to be in there, if we're going to be ripping up the road, let's determine if we can slow the traffic to the posted speed limit.
Jim, thank you. From Vision Zero to our final question, ACHD has numerous partners to serve citizens' transportation needs. I call this the alphabet soup. There are 6 cities. There's Compass. There's the county. There's the Idaho Transportation Department, and Valley Regional Transit. How do you hope to work with these partners to advance the Ada County Long Range Transportation Plan, known as Communities in Motion? And this last question, we start with Jim Hansen.
Yeah, the challenge is that between agencies is usually not personality, it's structural, it's written into their code. So it's important for the elected officials to spend time with each other, to understand each other's statutory obligations, and then to learn together the new technologies, the latest that has come out. Compass has a whole educational series. And I've attended many of those with other local government officials. And that's really good because you then have those same conversations with other local government officials around policies and around implementation of policies that you wouldn't necessarily have just at a board meeting. I think that's a really critical commitment. Spend time getting to know them, spend time getting to know their obligations and your obligations and the limitations on those, and then learn together so that you can come up with a good solution. Just as we did like at the Vision Zero training program, there were people from quite a number of other local government agencies who were learning about this at the same time I was.
Thank you. That concludes our question time for District 1. You know what? And I knew I was going to mess it up.
Let me answer
Kara,
it.
your turn. You know what? The seesawing thing
This is my favorite question because it's public involvement. Come
Well,
on.
let's do it. Go for it.
So I think that ACHD is so perfectly positioned to be the facilitator and the leader of these agencies rather than the divider or I don't like the word enemy, but there's been friction, let's just say that. And so I really think the ACHD, Ada County, and BRT should hold a joint session, and they should talk how they want to build out the Treasure Valley. They should invite the public. Compass could apply, but going into Communities in Motion, Communities in Motion was adopted in 2014. That's quite a long time ago. So we need a new build out plan. And I think that we should do it by bringing the community together and doing a 6-month intensive workshop where you have all the mayors come and all the planners come from each of the cities. And they sit down and they actually map out where they want growth to occur in their community. I think good cooperation, good collaboration, having face-to-face contact. I mean, this whole COVID thing has taught us how much we crave face-to-face contact. And when you are with somebody in a room who, I once was in a room with City of Boise official and a State of Idaho official, and in the news you would think that they don't like each other, but together they really got along. So face-to-face interaction is so important, and we need to keep that as much as we can safely during this time of uncertainty.
That concludes our questions for District 1 Commissioner candidates Jim Hansen and Kara Veit. Now we're going to give each candidate a chance to give a closing statement, and we'll start with Kara.
Okay. I noticed that throughout the evening, Commissioner Hansen mentioned a couple times that he was always in the minority in the vote. To me, that means that it's ineffective leadership. It's ineffective, and it's ineffective for my district. My district's not being represented. And so I want to represent my district, and I have a reputation. I've talked about public involvement all night tonight. I've talked about ideas. I've talked about how much I am how I love people. I love transportation. And so I want to represent the constituents in District 1 with effective leadership, and I want to build consensus with my fellow commissioners, because right now, the bridges are burned between Commissioner Hansen and his fellow commissioners. That's why he's always in the minority. So it's time that we have a representative that really represents our district, because Southeast Boise is growing at a very fast rate. And I want to be the representative because, like, I'm going to say the same thing that I said at the beginning. I will work for you, not the other way around. And I really want to represent you and your needs and your wants and what District 1 needs.
Thank you. Jim, your closing statement.
Yeah, thank you, Don, and thank you for hosting this. It's been a pleasure to serve on the Ada County Highway District these last 2 terms. And I've enjoyed working with the neighborhoods. Everything starts with the neighborhood and everything ends with the neighborhood. And I think it's really, really important. I think Kara points out, if you are passionate about something in your neighborhood, don't just cave to the pressure of a majority. You need to keep raising it. And I'm encouraged because by continuing to raise issues that matter to neighborhoods, things are changing. Some of the most important civil rights in our country were first introduced in minority dissenting opinions. And I think the transformation that we may see in this community, particularly things like Vision Zero, integrating a much more holistic view for impact fees and growth, is because those issues were raised and have percolated through the Ada County Highway District and in community organizations that we work with. I'm asking for one more term. I'm going to retire after that, but I have enjoyed working closely with the neighborhoods in District 1, the 13 wonderful neighborhood associations. Thank you.
Isn't local municipal democracy fun? Thank you, Kara and Jim, for participating in tonight's Neighborhood Ada County Highway District Candidate Forum. Links to this forum will be posted along with the other two tonight by the sponsoring neighborhood associations on Facebook at Neighborhood ACHD Candidate Forum and at IdahoPTV.org. We'll also put them up at BoiseDev.com. I'd like to remind our viewers to please vote on or before Tuesday, November 3rd. If you live in a district that is electing an ACHD commissioner this year, you will find this race towards the end of your ballot. Our District 2 candidate forum will begin in a few minutes.